The only thing that gon' be normal is distribution. Normal folks gon' infuse some. Optimize your lineups and you feed the rest, you mute them. Turning it up, these numbers are loud. Peeping this game from a nimbus is wild. Making it rain while I embrace all this risk, I'm insane. Talking about that best bell, I'm the best till into the next world. Guess I got next still. Best bell, I'm the best rest till into the next world. Guess I got next still.
And welcome in to the Week 10 Fantasy Football Review podcast and live stream of the BestBell Fantasy Football Podcast. My name is Bradley Stalder. You can follow me on Twitter at FFStalder. You can hit that red subscribe button. And of course, if you have questions about some players from Week 10, I'll probably be hitting on them, as tonight I'm going to be going through some of the matchups, talking about some of the most fantasy relevant players and my outlook for those particular players in Week 11 and moving forward. Without further ado, let's jump into the Thursday night game recap. The Atlanta Falcons fall to the home Carolina Panthers 25-15 in favor of the Carolina Panthers. And it really wasn't a good showing for PJ Walker. Yes, the Carolina Panthers came away with the win, but Walker only threw 16 passes, completed 10 of them, ran the ball 3 times, 14 yards, only 108 passing yards, finished with less than 6 fantasy points on the week. And he was one of my lowly ranked quarterbacks for the week. So I'll take a win for ranking PJ Walker outside of the top 20 of quarterbacks this week. But I'll take the L on Donta Foreman this week. I thought Donta Foreman, would be splitting carries more so with the newly revived Chuba Hubbard. And of course, Raheem Blackshear, I thought would still get sprinkling in here and there. But Foreman in this rainy matchup ended up getting 31 carries, 130 yards, and a touchdown. He didn't catch his only target, but you have to be impressed with what Foreman has done so far, right? He's carried the ball at least 15 times, 3 of the last 4 games. He's put up running back 13, running back 5, and running back 9 weeks, and that's operating on less than 70% of snaps. So he's still, not been taking, the full Christian McCaffrey or full Saquon Barkley share, but Donta Foreman has been a respectable player. And my projection for him going forward is as a high-end running back too. Like, it's going to be hard to rank him outside of that going forward. I think the limiting ceiling factor for Donta Foreman is the pass catching. If we look at what Foreman has done in that category, he's had no more than 3 targets and no more than 2 receptions in every game this season, but he's rushed for at least 118 yards 3 of the last 4 games, and the one game he didn't, it was that blowout in Cincinnati just last week in week 9. He gets Baltimore and Denver the next couple weeks, and so Denver was they bottled up they've been bottling up players, and Baltimore is also a rejuvenated defense. So will we expect 19 to 20 to 30 fantasy points from Donta Foreman? I don't think so. Plus, PJ Walker came out of this game with a sprained ankle, and so Baker Mayfield is expected to start. We've seen pluses and minuses from Baker Mayfield, but with how Donta Foreman is expected to move, you should be able to slot him in as a top 12 or so running back moving forward, just based on the volume. And I'm not too worried about the Chuba Hubbard or Raheem Blackshear. The reality is Donta Foreman got about 75% of the carries from the running backs in this game. So even with Chuba Hubbard back, 5 for 14 wasn't super effective on the ground. It's clear that Donta Foreman is the trusted back in this backfield. So you should expect between 15 and 20 carries every single week, with the lion's share going to Foreman. And as for the wide receivers for Carolina, Laviska Shenault led the team in fantasy points because of his, 2 carries for 42 yards and a rushing score. He finished 3 of 4 for 17 yards. It was a pathetic, receiving game most of the ways for all of these receivers for Carolina. Terrace Marshall disappointed, only had 2 targets. He had his 43-yard reception, but that was it. DJ Moore, 6 targets, only caught 4 passes, 29 yards. 6 out of the 16. That's a pretty good target share. But the concern is that DJ Moore was not getting passes down the field, and this was a rainy game. So unfortunately, like the Sharps should have taken the unders on DJ Moore for this game, only 4.9 fantasy points in half PPR. And then Shi Smith got a target, Ricci got a target, and Tommy Tremble, had one target but didn't bring that one in. Moving to the Atlanta Falcons, I had moved Marcus Mariota into a top 17 quarterback for this week, and he finished with almost 19 fantasy points in half PPR, 2 passing touchdowns. He did have a pick. He rushed the ball 3 times for 43 yards, and that's what's going to get Mariota into that running back 2 spot pretty much no matter what week it is. And in fact, this week, he's slotting in as the quarterback 12. He's had a quarterback 12 or better finish 4 times out of 10 weeks. So 40% of the time you're getting a top 12 quarterback on a team that you weren't expecting to get that type of production. That's been pretty good. So you have to be happy with what Marcus Mariota has brought to, for instance, your best ball teams. He's definitely subbed in if you took him as your quarterback 2 or quarterback 3. He's been a respectable sub in for you. And then from the backfield, it was massively disappointing. No running back had more than 3.2 fantasy points for the Atlanta Falcons. I was especially disappointed with Cordero Patterson's performance, only 5 for 18. He had 1 catch for 2 yards, only 1 target in this game. I mean, Caleb Huntley carried the ball 5 times. Tyler Algier was 8 for 20. Tyler Algier out-carried and out-targeted Cordero Patterson in this game. And I was asked earlier in the week, why do you think that is, Bradley? Why do you think that Cordero Patterson just didn't get the run and the targets like he had previously? And I think it had to do with the weather. If you think of the type of player that Cordero Patterson is, Cordero Patterson relies on juke cuts. He relies on his speed. He relies on pivoting in the open field. And when it's raining, right, it's harder to get grips on the field. It's harder to make those pivots and slide around. So instead, what the Atlanta Falcons did was they gave Avery Williams 4 carries. They gave Algier, who's a rumbling, tumbling running back, 8 carries. Caleb Huntley had 5 carries. So they were just trying to keep Cordero Patterson from not getting injured on a short week in bad weather. That's what I think the coaching staff is doing. And Arthur Smith, as much as we get frustrated by him, it's probably a smart move to keep his dynamic running back fresh for the rest of the way. So Atlanta falls to 4-6. Carolina moves to 3-7. Okay. We'll talk about Drake London. Drake London, 5 of 6 for 38 yards. He had the touchdown. Drake London is the wide receiver 26, and that's pending, of course, Monday Night Football. But you were bailed out by the touchdown here. 38 yards is not going to cut it, even with 6 targets for Drake London. I mean, Marcus Mariota, 30 passes. So you're getting a 20% target share from Drake London. You can't be unhappy with that. Same thing with Kyle Pitts. 8 targets for Kyle Pitts. 8 out of 30. We're talking 4 out of 15, right? That's almost 25% more than 25% target share for Kyle Pitts. You have to be disappointed with the production from both of those players. 2 receptions, 8 targets for Pitts, 28 yards. There were at least 3 different passes that if Kyle Pitts comes down with them, he's gone for a touchdown. He's gone for a 30-yard gain. He's gone for a 40-yard gain. But Marcus Mariota missed him by a foot or 2 on a couple passes. And it's a matter of touchdown variance. It's a matter of that high-level variance for Kyle Pitts. Unfortunately, you're probably going to have to roll with him and take him with his lumps. He is just such a volatile back-end tight end 1 moving the rest of the way, and you're going to have to live with it. If you have the luxury of a Dalton Schultz, you're starting a Dalton Schultz over Kyle Pitts, but you're not going to be starting a Harrison Bryant over him. You are starting David Njoku when he's healthy, but Kyle Pitts he's got league winning upside, and we've seen what can happen. He had separation on those passes, but it's a matter of the weather getting in the way. And it's the matter of you have to be happy with the target share, but missing on those passes, that is a big problem. So the rest of the way, Hodge and Bird and Zacchaeus, like, yeah, they had 10 and 7 and 4 fantasy points, but you're not going to bank on any of those players, getting in. And you are concerned about whether or not Kyle Pitts is the right fit with Marcus Mariota. I know that Arthur Smith put to bed or put to rest quarterback controversy. Desmond Ritter's not going to get play. He probably knows that Ritter's just simply not ready, although Mariota looked really bad. There was one sequence where Mariota rolled out to the left. He was about to be sacked, rolled on the ground, thankfully was down, and then threw the ball up in the air. Had he not been ruled down, it would have been the ugliest interception that we would have ever seen. So I am concerned about the Falcons, maintaining a consistent chemistry with Marcus Mariota. We can see high ceilings from this team. I think that is within the range of outcomes. We saw 30 passes, and imagine if Kyle Pitts comes down with 4 or 5 of those passes instead of just 2 of the 8 targets that he had. I mean, we're talking about a top 4 tight end for this week, but instead you're left with 3.8 fantasy points. Probably, he didn't help your fantasy team. We have a question here. Big Money Joe, who's your favorite waiver wire pickup the rest of the way? Kadarius, Watson, Van Wandel, or Nico Collins? It's Kadarius Toney by far. I'll talk about Kadarius Toney later on in the show, so stay tuned. We're going to keep moving through it. I appreciate all of that. Next, we're going to move to Munich, and the Seattle Seahawks fell to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and it was kind of a weird game. Anytime you're playing in Europe, you're going to see some weird things. And we saw a Leonard Fournette interception in this game, right? That was bizarre. And Fournette left this game with a hip injury. It does seem to be a minor injury, so that's good to hear from the Tampa Bay perspective. It's not good to hear from your Rachaad White waiver wire picker-uppers, okay? Rachaad White, obviously the number 1 waiver wire pickup, just in case. But I warned y'all the last couple weeks. Listen to my waiver wire live streams. I've been telling you, pick up Rachaad White. He went 22 for 105. Okay. He didn't have any targets, which is actually the bizarre part in this whole thing, is that Rachaad White had only had 0 targets and Leonard Fournette had 1 target. That's what's weird in this game. Keyshawn Vaughn had the same amount of targets as Leonard Fournette. So, Tom Brady doesn't throw for 50 passes. He only goes 22 for 29. He does have 17 fantasy points, once again outscored by Marcus Mariota from a fantasy points perspective. 22 for 258, 2 touchdowns. He does have a pick in this game. 6 carries for -3 yards. Doesn't really help you on that. He doesn't catch his only target when Leonard Fournette was trying to get it up to him, doing some sort of Philly special or Munich special. Maybe they don't pull out the Munich special anymore in Tampa, but you have to be happy with what Chris Godwin's doing. 8 targets, 6 receptions, 71 yards, and the touchdown. Godwin right now on the week is the wide receiver 13. And you can't be upset with that. I had him 3 or 4 spots above consensus for this week, and it comes through in the clutch. So Godwin, it was only a matter of time before that volume was going to catch up with him. So happy for Chris Godwin to get back into that wide receiver 1 fringe. Julio Jones caught a touchdown. That was nice. He is getting a lot of snaps, especially with Russell Gage out. So Julio Jones, I think, is still the wide receiver 3, even though he produced as the wide receiver 2 in fantasy points for this game. So, 3 for 53, 3 for 53, 5 targets, 5. That's still a 16% target share for Julio Jones. That's fine. That's fine with touchdown upside. Julio is at least a high-end flex consideration moving forward. And then Mike Evans, 5 for 54 on 6 targets, no touchdown in this game. And that's really going to be the difference for Mike Evans of whether or not he's going to be, more of your back-end wide receiver 1 like he is. He's wide receiver 12 on the season, but he finishes this week as wide receiver 41, which is not as good. Just without that touchdown, that's going to be a 6-point swing for you. And Tom Brady will continue to look his way in the end zone, but it's not, it was not a touchdown game for Mike Evans. Now, coming back to the tight ends for Tampa, okay, Cade Otton played 61% of snaps. He finishes at the tight end 18. I was higher on Otton. I thought he would get into that tight end 13 range. I thought Bray would not play as much this week. I knew he would be back. So, it was worth a shot for facing a defense that gives up the most fantasy points to tight ends in the NFL. Bray still 11 yards per catch, 3 for 35 on 3 targets, finishes with 5 fantasy points. Obviously, a little disappointing, but Cameron Bray here played 45% of snaps, finishes the tight end 39, 1 catch, 8 yards, 2 targets. And, it's still Cade Otton. I would still play if you're forced into a Bucs tight end position. That's who I would go with. But that's, I would definitely rank Cade Otton over Cameron Bray. He's going to run more routes. He's going to play more snaps. He's going to get more targets. So you're rolling with Cade Otton over Cameron Bray moving forward. And then with the Seattle matchup, Geno Smith, 2 passing touchdowns. He went 23 for 33, 275 passing yards, 4 carries for 22 yards. This was a textbook game. I had ranked Geno Smith ahead of Tom Brady in my fantasy pros accuracy rankings contest. And this came to fruition. Geno Smith this week with 19.2 fantasy points is coming in at the quarterback 10 so far going into Monday Night Football. Have to be happy with that. And then Kenneth Walker. I had warned y'all about Kenneth Walker. I put him as the running back 11. I think his ranking was as running back 9. So I was a little bit lower than consensus on Kenneth Walker because of the run defense that the matchup that I had mentioned earlier. And Kenneth Walker finishing as the running back 18, 10 for 17 on the ground, no touchdowns. But what saved Kenneth Walker's day was 6 for 55 through the air, 8 targets in this game. Obviously, for Kenneth Walker, that's a career high by doubling, his previous career high of 4 targets. So you have to be, thankful that Kenneth Walker bailed you out with those targets. It was not in his repertoire before. In fact, a season low for Kenneth Walker of games where he's played at least, 60% of snaps, the only 10 rushes in this game. Instead, Geno Smith threw 5 passes toward Tyler Lockett, came down with a touchdown, 3 for 42. Marquise Goodwin, 2 for 38 and a touchdown. DK Metcalf was 6 for 71. No touchdowns there. Fant and Disley and Parkinson all had between 2 and 4 targets. So, it was what it was with Seattle, honestly. Like, they were just spreading the ball around, and Lockett has been just a talk about a value. I was listening to some podcasts that I had done previously in like March and April and May, and I was talking about how Tyler Lockett at even wide receiver 38 was a tremendous value. And right now, Tyler Lockett is the wide receiver 10 in fantasy points. Like, what? He's wide receiver 27 this week, 3 for 42 with that touchdown. But you have to be happy with what Lockett has put up for you this year. Wide receiver 20 week, wide receiver 30 week, wide receiver 27, wide receiver 3, wide receiver 39, 21, 10, and 27. Like, we were Tyler Lockett's not been as boom busty as we had seen in previous years. Instead, he's been a consistent wide receiver 2 with a couple wide receiver 1 games in there. So you have to be happy with Tyler Lockett and how Geno Smith has been getting him the ball. So fire up Tyler Lockett very comfortably as wide receiver 2 moving forward. And there's no concerns with DK Metcalf. He was just fine in this game. 6 for 71, finishing as the wide receiver 32. I mean, it was a down game because he didn't have the touchdown, but DK has 4 touchdowns on the season. So he's probably doing just fine there. Lincoln was here, asked a question. Just curious, what is Fields now worth in Superflex Dynasty Leagues? Because I bought him at a way cheaper price. I think he's going for not keep trade cut value. Yeah. Justin Fields, I think, has catapulted himself into that Kyler Murray tier. I don't think he's at the Patrick Mahomes, the Josh Allen tier yet, but is that possible? Sure. I think that he's within the Jalen Hurts tier. I think he's right there. So I think that you can value him as probably a top 6 quarterback pretty comfortably. And it's within the range of outcomes, whether you view him as, a quarterback 3, a quarterback 4, a quarterback 5. Like, I think that still remains to be seen because the Bears defense is really bad right now. Like, I think that's understated. The Chicago Bears have scored 28 points in the last 3 games, and they've lost all 3 games. So they're scoring points. It's just that their defense is giving up more, forcing Justin Fields into these game scripts where he's going to have to run and be aggressive. He's going to have to pass downfield. So I wonder if that's going to maintain for next year as well. It's possible. It's possible. And so that's why I don't want to say like, no, he's like definitely outside of that Jalen Hurts or Kyler Murray tier. I think that he is. When you set the run at quarterback rushing record, Lincoln was here. Absolutely. He is within that range of outcomes now. So I'm pretty comfortable moving forward with Justin Fields. We'll talk more about his particular matchup here in a couple minutes. We are going to move on to the Minnesota-Buffalo game. And here is the game of the year, at least so far. Minnesota wins this one. They go to 8-1. Buffalo falls to 6-3 at home. Josh Allen, 21.6 fantasy points. And he, of course, is the quarterback 1 overall. But we are pending Monday Night Football to see if he finishes, as the quarterback 5 or quarterback 4. We'll see where he falls. But 29-43, 330 passing yards. He had 1 passing touchdown. He has 2 picks, and that's something that Josh Allen has been struggling with as of late. He's had 2 interceptions 4 times this season. So the aggressiveness down the field, we're starting to see a few more hiccups in the Josh Allen passing capability, and that's kind of erased by all of the rushing he's had. Like Josh Allen right now has 68 attempts, 476 rushing yards. His career high is 763. So he's well on pace to outpace that. It's just that there are concerns with his passing, that his inefficiencies are going to be catching up with him. Now it's Devin Singletary in the backfield. It is Devin Singletary. 13 carries compared to James Cook's 5. Nyheim Hines had no carries in this game. Duke Johnson even got 2 carries in this game. It's clearly Devin Singletary's role. Singletary even had the most targets among the backfield mates as well. So Singletary, you're going to have to fire up as a pretty comfortable like running back 2. And he finishes this week as the running back 12, 13 for 47 on the ground. He had 2 touchdowns. I think that the touchdown possibility is always there when Buffalo is in scoring position. But my concern is that, of course, he's had no more than 14 carries in a game, except 1 game so far this year, and that was against Kansas City, where he played 86% of the snaps. So I think that Devin Singletary is like a low-end running back 2 with mid running back 2 upside, that the touchdown possibilities there, and he hit on 2 touchdowns in this game. James Cook is nothing more than a change of pace back, 5 for 22. Nyheim Hines not getting involved almost at all. In fact, Nyheim Hines only played 8% of snaps. He played 6%. So you have to at least say for yourself, like, oh, he increased the snap share by 33% of what he had previously. But that really doesn't mean much because Nyheim Hines, running back 56 on the week. Stephon Diggs had a pretty big game. 12 for 16. He's the wide receiver 2 on the season, wide receiver 7 for this week. 12 for 128. He did not have a touchdown, 16 targets. You have to be happy with the usage of Stephon Diggs, bona fide wide receiver 1. Gabriel Davis, spar for spar, has been trying to keep up with Stephon Diggs this year, but Gabe Davis, the wide receiver 27 on the week, 6 for 93. He had the touchdown, and the weather was looking bad. And I said earlier this game, maybe this is a reason to fade Gabriel Davis. Well, that was not good, because Gabriel Davis finishing as the wide receiver 8 on the week, 18.3 fantasy points. He's an every down wide receiver. And with Josh Allen throwing the ball down the field as much as he is, Gabriel Davis is a wide receiver 2, and that's how he's been valued, or that's where his projection or his fantasy points are for the year. Now, Isaiah McKenzie comes up big. 4 catches, 37 yards. He had 5 targets. He also had a rush for 18 yards. And Isaiah McKenzie, I've been kind of disappointed with the amount of usage and volume that he's been getting, but he's clearly outplaying Khalil Shakir, who only had 1 catch for 6 yards on 2 targets. Dawson Knox had a decent game, 4 for 57, 6 receptions. And ultimately, the Buffalo Bills just fall short in this game. But what's so impressive is Justin Jefferson. And Jefferson finishing the game with 30.3 fantasy points as the wide receiver 3 on the week. Played 100% of snaps, 193 receiving yards, 1 touchdown. He had the catch of the year and perhaps the catch of this decade. 4th and 18, snatches the ball away with 1 hand, falling to the ground out of the 2 hands of the defender. This was a highlight reel type of catch for Justin Jefferson, and it just encapsulates. It's a microcosm of what Justin Jefferson can do as a wide receiver, just bringing to life this Minnesota Vikings offense. And it's clear that it's through Justin Jefferson this offense runs. And that's a change from previous years where Dalvin Cook was the main engine that got the Vikings to run. Now it's Justin Jefferson, but Dalvin Cook had a good game. He rushed, right? He had a pretty large rush in the third quarter. I think it was about 55 yards, but Cook finishes 14 for 119. He had the touchdown, 3 receptions for 27 yards. And aside from that one big play, Dalvin Cook was getting bottled up pretty well. And that touchdown run is what put him over the edge. Cook finishing with 22.1 fantasy points, the running back 4 on the week. You're still rolling Dalvin Cook out as a running back 1, but we're starting to see hints of inefficiencies. The yards per carry, aside from that one, the efficiency metrics, the juke rates, the yards per route run, all decreasing over the course of the previous year's rates for Dalvin Cook. So we're starting to see signs of decrease. It's just that the amount of volume that Cook is getting, he had 17 touches in this game, and there's no plan of Dalvin Cook going away anytime soon. CJ Ham vultures a touchdown from him. Alexander Madison didn't do much in this game, 3 for 11 with a catch on 8 yards or for 8 yards. Adam Thielen was mildly disappointing. He had 7 targets in this game, 5 receptions for 49 yards. And KJ Osborne also had 11 targets in this game, only had 35 receiving yards, though. But newcomer TJ Hawkinson, 10 targets, 10 out of 50, a 20% target share for TJ Hawkinson, 7 receptions, only 45 yards. So it's clear that Hawkinson is a trusted tight end close to the line of scrimmage and also like a goal line opportunity type of tight end. There were multiple times where TJ Hawkinson over the last couple of games had been targeted in the red zone. And so you can anticipate that Minnesota is just going to continue to feed Hawkinson as they gave up some nice draft capital to acquire him from Detroit. We're moving on to Detroit. Speaking of Detroit edges out the Chicago Bears as the Lions traveled to Chicago, and Justin Fields had himself a game, right? He only had 20 pass attempts in this game, but what's new? Justin Fields run for 145 yards, 447 to be exact, 13 rushes, right? This is the 5th time this year where Justin Fields had at least 10 carries in a game, and Fields has had 60 or more rushing yards 5 straight games. He's finished as the quarterback 1 each of the last 2 weeks. He's finished as a top 5 quarterback each of the last 4 weeks. You have to be elated if you have Justin Fields because he has been a fantasy quarterback 1 and bona fide points scorer. There's no reason for you to fade him. And let's talk about his matchups moving forward, right? Justin Fields gets Atlanta. Smash matchup. He gets the New York Jets. That's going to be a little tougher of a defense, but still doable. He gets the Green Bay Packers, and the Green Bay Packers, as we've seen, can give up fantasy points to all the different Tony Pollard, Dak Prescott. They're giving up fantasy points left and right. Philadelphia is going to be tough. Buffalo is going to be tough, both coming out of the bye week. But then Justin Fields gets Detroit week 17, and that may be the winner. Like, you may win your leagues by having Justin Fields week 17. So if you are guaranteed the playoffs, like, you're going to have to suffer through Buffalo and Philly during the fantasy playoffs, but the championship week is Detroit, and he is poised to be the number one quarterback overall that week. It is so within his range of outcomes. And you're hoping that actually, you can, I don't know, buy low on the stock if that's possible in Justin Fields after those Philly and Buffalo games, but maybe just after the Philly game because people will be so short-sighted about it. It depends, but nevertheless, it's clear that Justin Fields is the main go-to rusher for this team. He led the Bears in rushing. Khalil Herbert had 10 carries in this game, 10 for 57, but Herbert left with a hip injury. Okay. And, he suffered that injury. We will see how he prepares for Atlanta, but once again, Atlanta is a smash matchup. You should be starting Khalil Herbert as a flex consideration if he is fully cleared to play. David Montgomery got out carried by Justin Fields and Khalil Herbert, and this is what we should have been worried about. And what I had been saying for the last couple of weeks is that, if you're planning on a running back or backfield takeover, David Montgomery was in big jeopardy. Like, he goes 9 for 37. One catch for 7 yards, doesn't do much on the ground, 4.9 fantasy points, does not fall in the end zone. And that's what had bailed out, David Montgomery a few times this year, is getting that touchdown. Like, if we look at week 5 against Minnesota, 12 for 20, but he gets the touchdown, right? Week 7 against New England, 15 for 62, he gets the touchdown. David Montgomery finishes as the running back 38 this week, whereas Khalil Herbert, only 10 carries, 57 yards, finishes the running back 35. So these are like floor games for both of them, but I think Herbert's ceiling is higher just because he's a more dynamic back, and we've seen Khalil Herbert rip off some 20, 30, 40-yard runs. So if Khalil Herbert is somehow still on your waiver wire, he is a tremendous add for you. And then I'll talk about Detroit. Actually, let's talk about some of the wide receivers for Chicago before we get into it. Mooney went 4 for 4 for 57 yards. Dante Pettis went 1 catch for 9 yards, had 1 target, 1 carry for 8 yards. Pringle was activated off of the IR and had 1 catch for 12 yards and 2 targets. Claypool only played about 30% of the snaps. Yeah, he played 31% of the snaps, finished as wide receiver 90, 1.3 fantasy points. Equanimous St. Brown didn't have a catch in this game, but he had 2 carries. But this was a Cole Kmet game. And if you're somehow still low on Cole Kmet, he's had 2 smash games so far. And yes, there was a blown coverage against Detroit, and that's what got Cole Kmet, that big play and the touchdown. But Cole Kmet also had another touchdown. He's had 5 touchdowns in the last 3 games. Cole Kmet has finished as the tight end 12, tight end 2, and tight end 1 each of the last 3 weeks. Cole Kmet is finally starting to come into his own. The Notre Dame product, is the tight end 10 on the week, and you have to be happy with what Cole Kmet is. I'm still firing him up as a low end tight end 1 because we've seen so much of those be so many of the fantasy points be deriven out of the touchdowns, like drawn from the touchdowns, and those are not as sustainable and not as sticky. So I would, still fire up Cole Kmet. He's startable for you for sure. I mean, you can't just ignore what he's done over the last 3 weeks, but also like you kind of can't ignore what he did to start the season. You got to hedge just a little bit. He's only gone over 45 receiving yards once this season. So it's not like he's getting tremendous volume, but you have to like how he's been used near the red zone and in the open field the last couple games. So as the offense has opened up for Chicago, Cole Kmet has found his way. So I think that the ceilings are higher now for Cole Kmet, but the floor is still a little scary for me. Fire him up as a low-end tight end 1. Now we'll move on to Detroit and then answer some of your questions as we keep rolling. Jared Goff, 19 of 26, 236 yards. He had 1 passing touchdown, 4 carries for 14 yards, 14.84 fantasy points, finishing as the quarterback 21 on the week. right? The only one touchdown in this game was kind of hurting him. And the Bears, you would have expected them giving up more fantasy points through the air, but it's just not what happened. On the ground is where the money was made, in particular Jamal Williams, right? 16 of 59, a touchdown for Jamal Williams. That was pretty nice. Inefficient, but goal line efficiency, able to get in. DeAndre Swift, 6 carries, 6 yards, a touchdown, 1 reception on 3 targets for 6 yards, finished with 7.7 fantasy points. And as the running back 30, right? That touchdown bailed out DeAndre Swift in his fantasy game so far, because he was only averaging 1 yard per carry. And this is the second time in the last 3 weeks where DeAndre Swift has averaged 1.2 yards per carry or fewer. So the Lions are obviously limiting his snaps. He went down from 55 to 16 to 31% of snaps each of the last 2 weeks. So he's nearly doubled, but he gets the Giants, Buffalo the next 2 weeks, and those are some tougher run defenses. Then he gets Jacksonville, which is nice. Then he gets Minnesota, New York Jets, and then he gets Carolina and Chicago in the fantasy playoffs, baby. So DeAndre Swift, you got to like that moving forward, but you're still a little hesitant. You'll have DeAndre Swift as a running back 2 moving forward until we start seeing, back to the snap shares earlier in the season, like when Swift was getting, the 51% and the 67% earlier in the year. I'm on Ross St. Brown, baby. My mic was unmuted there for a second, so we're going to have to do adjustments. But nevertheless, I'm on Ross St. Brown. I got really excited. I disconnected my mic. I was that excited. I'm on Raw. 11 targets, 10 receptions, 119 yards. You knew it was going to be an Amon-Ra St. Brown game. It was a good matchup against the Chicago Bears, who give up a lot of fancy points to the wide receiver position. They also had a positive matchup, Amon-Ra did, in the slot, and he is a couple weeks removed from his ankle injury, so not falling into the end zone, that's unlucky for Amon-Ra, but 17.7 fantasy points, you have to be happy with firing him up, and he's the wide receiver 10 on the week. I had him at wide receiver 8, so a little off there, but you still are happy with Amon-Ra St. Brown and his production, the target share, all of that. Khalif Raymond, 3 for 47. Khalif Raymond ended up playing 82% of snaps in this game. So you were happy with the amount of target share, the amount of snaps that he was playing. Finishes wide receiver 57, a boom bust tight, wide receiver 4 for you moving forward. Tom Kennedy had a 44-yard catch in this game. Brock Wright, aka Block Wright, 1 catch for 2 yards in that passing touchdown. Mitchell had 1 target, 1 catch for 4 yards. So ultimately, it was mostly pedestrian day for the Lions, but they ended up pulling out the game at the end. And the Lions jumped to 3-6. The Bears fall to 3-7. And this is actually a good thing for the Bears moving forward, that Justin Fields has a bad defense, and it's going to force him to score some fantasy points for you. We've got a question from Alicia Bowen. Should I trade Mark Andrews or TJ Hawkinson? I would keep Andrews around. The ceiling is just so much higher, right? Andrews is the number 1 receiving option for the Baltimore Ravens. He's going to command a higher target share, 25 to 30%, and he's a goal line option. Whereas TJ Hawkinson, I wouldn't imagine getting higher than about a 20 or 22% target share in this Vikings offense. He's clearly the number 2 option behind Justin Jefferson, and then may flip-flop with Thielen from week to week, or even as we saw this past week, KJ Osborne getting 11 targets, out-targeting Hawkinson and Thielen. So I would keep Mark Andrews. I would see if someone is really biting on TJ Hawkinson and see if you can upgrade. But if you can get a king's ransom for Mark Andrews, I'm fine with rolling with TJ Hawkins. It just depends on what you need and what your league mates are willing to trade you for either player. That's how I would view it. Let's keep her rolling. We're going to go to Kansas City now. And the Kansas City Chiefs hosted the Jacksonville Jaguars. The game 17-27 in favor of the Chiefs. And Patrick Mahomes, 26-35, 4 passing touchdowns, 331 passing yards. He had a pick in this game, 7 carries for 39 yards. And Mahomes right now is the quarterback 2 on the week. Mahomes has finished as the quarterback 6 or better every game since week 4. Um, he had almost half of the pass attempts that he had in the previous game, but 4 passing touchdowns, 1 pick, 7 rushes. You have to be happy with what Mahomes has been putting up. And it's not so much dwelling on Mahomes because you know what you have in Patrick Mahomes. You've got a bona fide quarterback, one. But let's move on to the running back position. And this is interesting. Jerick McKinnon, 1 carry for 2 yards. He plays 38% of the snaps. He has 8 targets, 6 receptions in this game, 56 receiving yards. But the bigger storyline is Isaiah Pacheco. Isaiah Pacheco, 16 carries, 82 rushing yards, 56 snaps. This is kind of like Donta Foreman light. This is Dameon Pierce light. There is a clear third down back, and the third down back is going to get a lot of play, and that's Jerick McKinnon. He's not going to go away. He's not going to cede that. But Isaiah Pacheco is a possible league winner on a huge upside offense. As we know, Pacheco, 82 rushing yards. He did lose a fumble this game, running back 33, but you have to love the rushing volume and the trust that the Chiefs showed to him, because Clyde Edwards-Helaire pretty much evaporated from this game. A 6% snap share. He did not finish with a touch in this game, 2 targets. They've completely phased out Clyde Edwards-Helaire from this matchup. So I am concerned about the prospects of Clyde Edwards-Helaire moving forward. Like you're rolling with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. No, you're not. Just like the Chiefs. If Clyde Edwards-Helaire is on the bench, he should be at best on your bench. If worse, just drop to the waiver wire. You drop him like he's hot. Clyde Edwards-Helaire should not be on your team unless you are like a 32-team league sort of deal. Okay, let's move on to the wide receiver position, because Kadarius Toney got some play in this game. And we saw in week 9 in his Kansas City debut, only a 9% target or 9% snap share. He had 2 targets in that game, 12 yards. But then what was big for Kadarius Toney in this game, he finishes as the wide receiver 12, 4 receptions, 57 yards. He had a touchdown. He also had 2 rushes for 33 yards. We're talking 90 total yards and a touchdown on 6 touches. You have to love that out of Kadarius Toney. And he was one of those wide receivers that I was smashing in round like 8 and 9 this year, and is sometimes in round 10. And Kadarius Toney is, as I mentioned before, he's the human joystick. He led all wide receivers in juke rate last year, former first-round pick. And he even on the touchdown, as we saw, like faked a hamstring injury to mock the Giants. Like, dude gets it that he was not being managed well in the New York organization, but happy that he's getting a lot of run, and he could be a solid wide receiver too, moving forward for you. So you have to be happy with that. Okay, Marcus Valdes-Scantling right now. He had 4 targets, 3 receptions, 60 yards, and a touchdown. Juju left this game early. Okay, he had 2 catches for 4 targets, 33 yards. It was turning into being a big Juju Smith-Schuster game, but he left with that targeting hit, and we are awaiting to see if Juju is going to get some more testing done, and we'll see how he progresses through the concussion protocol. Now, of course, as funny as it sounds, like Travis Kelce, it felt like he disappointed as the tight end 2 overall this week. Like only 7 targets, only 6 receptions, only 81 receiving yards, right? He had a touchdown in this game. It felt like it was a disappointing week, even though he's the tight end 2, right? Kelce, the tight end 1 overall. Noah Gray vultures a touchdown. Gray finishes 2 of 20 for that touchdown. And so I'm not worried about Noah Gray stealing much from Travis Kelce moving forward. But the biggest takeaway from this side of the ball is Pacheco projects to be the running back 1 given his snap share and the amount of carries, and that Kadarius Toney is clearly the wide receiver 2. At least they're in the way that they're manufacturing touches, and that's how I think they want him to be. Okay, let's move to the other side of the ball. Trevor Lawrence, 20.96 fantasy points. He finishes at the quarterback 7 this week. I had him as a top 10 quarterback this week. 2 passing touchdowns. He had 26 rushing yards, 259 passing yards as well. Travis Etienne was disappointing this week. 8.8 fantasy points. He's the running back 12 on the year. Running back 28 this week, 11 for 45 on the ground, 3 for 28 through the air. I would have expected more passes for Travis Etienne, but nevertheless, that's just how it worked out. JaMycal Hasty, right, only got a couple touches in this game. One reception, 1 carry, 22% snap share. And that's what JaMycal Hasty has been floating in between, is the like 15 to 25% snap share. It was a big Christian Kirk game, 9 of 105 and 2 touchdowns. Christian Kirk as the wide receiver 4 this week. He's playing tremendously. So you need to be happy about what Christian Kirk has been doing. He had a plus matchup this week. So yes, you wanted Christian Kirk in your starting lineups. And Zay Jones was a player I bumped up as well. 10 targets in this game, 68 receiving yards. He was a player that I put on last week's waiver wire. And I said, you need to be picking up Zay Jones. He finishes 8 for 68, right? And 10.8 fantasy points, wide receiver 30 on the week. I mentioned him as a wide receiver 3 candidate, a flex possibility, and he did not disappoint in this game. Marvin Jones did disappoint, 1 of 33. He had a 33-yard catch, but that was it. Jamal Agnew had 4 targets in this game for only 4 total yards. Evan Ingram, I docked down pretty significantly. He left this, he had been dealing with an injury, a back injury, and he also got gypped out of a touchdown in this game. 3 receptions, 4 targets, finishing as the tight end at 28 this week. So, better days ahead maybe for Evan Ingram, but, if he comes down with that touchdown, we're talking about a much different game. Cleveland-Miami game, and Cleveland gets trounced by Miami in Miami, 39-17. And you had to like what you saw from Tua Tagovailoa, right? 25 of 32, 285 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 carry for no yards. Tua finishing as the quarterback 3 for this week. Tua has finished as the quarterback 4 or better in 4 games, right? 3 of those are in 4 of those games. And right, one of the games he left early because of the concussion against Cincinnati. So you have to be liking what you see with Tua. His upside is tremendous there. So you're rolling Tua out as a bona fide quarterback 1 the rest of the way. My only concern really is that Week 17 matchup against New England in New England. So there we go. Okay. I just got an update from Ticketmaster telling me that I made the wait list for the Taylor Swift ticket. So my wife will be happy. Tomorrow's her Super Bowl. That's just how it is. All right. Let's keep moving on. It's clearly the Jeff Wilson backfield, right? 21 fantasy points, finishing as the running back 6 this week. You're rolling with Jeff Wilson, right? 119 rushing yards, 17 rushes, 61% snap share. Like, what, twice when he was the starter for San Francisco, did he get above that threshold? Twice. So he has a better role, if anything, now in Miami under Coach Mike McDaniel. They are on a bye in Week 11, so you're going to have to wait around. But coming out of the bye in Week 12, Jeff Wilson gets the Houston Texans. He's going to be a running back 1 again. That's right. Fire him up. But you should not fire him up in Week 11 because he's on his bye. Raheem Mostert also played well. Let's give credit where credit is due. Raheem Mostert, the running back 22 on the season, but only 28% snap share. It's clear that Jeff Wilson is playing significantly ahead of Raheem Mostert. Mostert 8 of 65, 4 receptions for 22 yards. Jeff Wilson out-targeted. He out-rushed, out-carried the whole bit over Raheem Mostert. So Raheem Mostert is nothing more than a volatile low-end running back 2, even though, he finishes as the running back 10 this week. That's how I'm valuing Raheem Mostert, as a volatile low-end running back 2. Okay. Ingold had 4 receptions for 45 yards and a touchdown. Salvin Ahmed sprinkled in 3 carries. Trent Sherfield, 4 of 5 for 63 receiving yards and a touchdown. Tyreek Hill was my wide receiver 1 this week. I missed out on that. Only 12.9 fantasy points, 5 receptions, 44 yards. He did get the touchdown to salvage the day, finishing as the wide receiver 24, 5 for 44, no rush attempts. Jalen Waddle, 4 for 66 on 5 targets. Cedric Wilson had a 7-yard catch. Mike Gesicki, 2 for 31 on 3 targets. So Miami really just salted the game away against the Browns on the ground. Jacoby Brissett, though, 16.5 fantasy points, finishing as the quarterback 17 on the week, 22 of 35. He had a touchdown, no picks, 40 yards rushing. But really, who was bottled up in this game was Nick Chubb, 11 for 63. Yeah, he averaged over 5 yards a carry, but you'd expect Chubb to really have like a big game. Chubb had rushed for at least 90 rushing yards in all but 2 games before this matchup against Miami, and he goes 11 for 63. That is a season low in rush attempts, and he set a season high in targets with 4. Kareem Hunt, though, is not trusted at all. 2.4 fantasy points, running back 46. That's the second time this season that he's finished outside the top 36 of running back. So we've seen some of the floor for Kareem Hunt, and it's a little scarier than we anticipated. The wide receiver who's really sticking out to me for the Browns is Donovan Peoples-Jones, right? Peoples-Jones, 5 for 99. No touchdowns, though. And you have to be happy with, 9 targets for Donovan Peoples-Jones on 35 pass attempts. That's almost a 25. That's a higher than 25% target share for Donovan Peoples-Jones. My bold take this year was that Donovan Peoples-Jones outscores Amari Cooper. And while that is not true, because Donovan Peoples-Jones has 0 touchdowns on the year and Amari Cooper has 5 touchdowns on the year, it's going to be hard for Donovan Peoples-Jones to make good on that bold call. But Peoples-Jones, 9 targets, 99 yards. Cooper, 3 targets, 32 yards. Okay, I'll take the wins when I can. But I think Amari Cooper's ceiling is higher. You have to like what Peoples-Jones, though, is doing over the last few games, right? 9 targets in this game, 4, 6, 5, 7, 9, and then week 1, 11 targets. Peoples-Jones with a higher ceiling with Deshaun Watson coming back in a couple weeks. So fire up your Donovan Peoples-Jones as a flex consideration, right? Peoples-Jones, wide receiver 26 this week. As I said, Amari Cooper, 3 for 32 with 3 targets. David Bell, 3 for 24 for 5 targets. And Harrison Bryant. I made a video once David Njoku was ruled out that Bryant was a touchdown-dependent tight end 2 with tight end 1 possibility. And he gets the touchdown in this game, plays 76% of the snaps, finishes as the tight end 7 despite only 3 catches for 15 yards. And you got to be happy with Harrison Bryant as a plug-and-play tight end here. Pharaoh Brown had 5 targets for 13 yards, so Bryant may have played 76% of snaps, but Pharaoh Brown also played 42% of snaps. And Pharaoh Brown has been, ever since week 6, floating between that 20 and 40% snap share, which is what I anticipate with him moving forward. All right, let's move on to the Houston-New York Giants game. And the Giants edge the Texans 24-16. New York moves to 7-2 on the season. Houston moves to 1-7-1 on the year. Daniel Jones, 18.28 fantasy points. He had 2 passing touchdowns. He did not throw for 200 passing yards in this game, only 17 attempts. And Daniel Jones finishing as the quarterback 13 on the week. But you have to be, this was very obviously a Saquon Barkley game. Barkley with 35 carries in this game, 152 yards. He did have a touchdown, 1 reception for 8 yards, 22.5 half PPR fantasy points. He's the running back 3 on the year, and the running back 3 this week, played 80% of snaps. Have to be happy with what Saquon Barkley has been doing for you for fantasy this year. If you were able to get him in the second round or beyond, you're ecstatic with the value that he's brought. Finally, we've seen a ceiling game, and it came against Houston once again. So you see 150 rushing yards against the Houston defense. That's almost a lock. Breida does sprinkle in 6 carries for 20 yards. Darius Slayton had a big reception. He had a 54-yard catch. And then aside from that, also 41, 2 for 41. Okay, that was fine. But Darius Slayton, I think he's not a wide receiver you can really trust. He's not a standard 12-team league flex option. He's more of, if you're in a deeper league, flex consideration. Because Darius Slayton, over the last couple weeks, he's finished as the wide receiver 23, 71, 18, 40, and now 11. So you have seen a few more of the spike weeks for Darius Slayton, but it's still not trusted. Like I don't trust it based on the target share. Okay, Isaiah Hodgins is an interesting deep stash. 2 catches for 41 yards. Hodgins ended up playing 62% of the snaps. Wan'Dale Robinson has been disappointing the last couple of weeks. He had a season high in snaps, but only 2 targets, only 20 receiving yards, and his 1 carry went for -5 yards. You really want to see more out of Wan'Dale Robinson. And then Kenny Golladay goose-egged. He played, 38% of snaps, but 2 targets, no receptions. We're all good with we are all good with Kenny Golladay. You do not need him. Cager is a deep consideration. 2 targets, 9 yards, and a touchdown. Tanner Hudson, once again, leads the tight end group in targets. He's the deep stash that you're probably looking for, because Tanner Hudson, those 3 targets coming late in the game. But Cager actually played, more snaps, 65% of snaps to Hudson's 18. So maybe we've seen a shift in the guard here. You should be considering Lawrence Cager here, even though he lands back on the practice squad, played way more snaps than Tanner Hudson. So I wonder if that's going to be a change that we see for the Giants moving forward. And flipping to the other side for the Houston Texans, right? Davis Mills, 22 of 37, 319 passing yards, and a touchdown and a pick. Dameon Pierce, classic Dameon Pierce game, 17 carries, 94 yards. He had 2 catches for 28 yards. 3 targets. He's really not much of a pass catcher, but he gets the rushing yards. He is efficient on the ground. 11.2 fantasy points. Dameon Pierce finishing as the running back 17. It's pretty much the Dameon Pierce's floor is running back 24, and his ceiling is running back 8. Like, he's going to finish between those because of the rushing volume he's getting and because of how efficient he is. But I think he lacks a lot of that consistent ceiling. So you're rolling out Dameon Pierce as a solid running back too. Rex Burkhead sprinkled in a carry and two receptions for a total of 30 yards. Dario Ogunbowale had a catch for 13 yards. Nico Collins came back to this game off of an injury, 10 targets, 49 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Still, I'm giving him the Darius Slayton treatment, right? I don't know what to expect from Nico Collins. This was his best game of the year, right? Set a season high in targets, set a season high in receptions. His first touchdown of the year. So, it's encouraging to see that Nico Collins right off the injury gets it, but I'm not flexing him unless I'm in a deeper league. Chris Moore got 6 targets. Brandon Cooks had 4 receptions for 7 targets. Both Chris Moore and Brandon Cooks fall outside of the top 36 for wide receivers. And then moving to the tight end position, Jordan Akins is the tight end that you wanted in this matchup. 8.7 fantasy points, 3 receptions for 72 yards. Akins finishing with 52% of the snaps. OJ Howard played 52% as well, but only had 1 target, no reception. So if you're leaning a pass catching tight end in the Texans offense, you're going to go with Jordan Akins. All right, let's answer a couple questions. Do I trade Cooper Kupp? Depending on what you get. Probably, if someone's willing to buy him. It's going to be a longer ankle injury. I don't know if he's going to be out for the year, probably for the fantasy playoffs. I wouldn't be surprised if Cooper Kupp gets shut down if the Rams are pushed out of it, So we'll talk about the Rams here shortly, but it was certainly, disappointing to see Kupp go down, and thankfully he avoided a fracture from what I hear. Football Talks from YouTube, trade Barkley, Olave, Goddard. Ooh, okay, so those are some big pieces moving away. For CMC, Lamb, Schultz, and Deshaun Watson. So you're pretty much lateral moving with CMC and Barkley. You're upgrading with Lamb. You're downgrading with Schultz, but you're getting Deshaun Watson. So yeah, I would, if you needed a quarterback, I would go that way, but I would not, if it's a one quarterback league and you don't need it, I would not, do that deal. Okay, there we go. All right. Yeah. Unless you really, really, really need a quarterback, I would not do that deal. Moving on to Pittsburgh, where we see the Steelers edge out the New Orleans Saints. Kenny Pickett, 19 fantasy points in this game, right? He finishes as the quarterback, 8 rushes for 51 yards and a rushing score. He threw for 199 passing yards, only 18 completions in this game. But Najee Harris finally has a redemption game, still can't get anything going through the air, averages almost 5 yards per carry. Running back 21 is the best that you can do for Najee Harris here. In fact, running back 21 is the best he's done since Tampa Bay in week 6. And running back 21 is the second best or third best finish of the year for Najee Harris. He only has 1 rushing score on the year, 2 receiving scores. So even though he got 20 carries and 99 rushing yards, it's still disappointing because Jaylen Warren, 9 carries for 37 yards, but Jaylen Warren also had 3 receptions for 40 yards. It's just that Jaylen Warren was ripping off some of these big plays. It seemed like every couple minutes I was hearing about Jaylen Warren doing this, Jaylen Warren doing that. He had 12 touches in this game. He's not going to go away anytime soon. And Warren finishes the running back 25. Jaylen Warren has finished as a top 30 running back each of the last 2 weeks, right? And he's had 9 and 12 touches each of those weeks. So it's very interesting to me that they're just going to continue to give Najee Harris touches, but Jaylen Warren is also very much involved, right? Najee Harris, 60% of the snaps, that is aside from week 5 in Buffalo, and week 1 against Cincinnati, that ties a season low. Whereas Jaylen Warren, right, 43% of the snaps, that is the second highest for the season, only behind week 5 against Buffalo as well, when that game was pretty much a blowout. So it's still Najee over Jaylen Warren, but we're seeing that get closer and closer. Najee may have held him off for a couple more weeks due to the nearly 100 rushing yards, because coaches do care about that type of thing. But Jaylen Warren, I think he's still earned the snaps that he's going to continue to get. As for the rest of Pittsburgh, George Pickens, 4 targets, 32 receiving yards. He had 2 carries for 23 rushing yards and a rushing score. Pickens, wide receiver 23 on the week, despite the low target share. The touchdown carried him there. Deontay Johnson, only 5 targets, 4 for 63, finishing as the wide receiver 39. And then Steven Sims, I had mentioned him as a really, really deep wide receiver consideration. Steven Sims, 38% of the snaps, 1 reception for 15 yards, and 2 carries as well. There was a lot of carries by the wide receivers in this matchup. Pat Freiermuth, though. Pat Freiermuth led the team in targets with 7 targets. He only finished with 5.6 fantasy points, but 4 for 36, 7 targets, played nearly 70% of the snaps. Have to be happy with Pat Freiermuth's usage. On the flip side, though, it was disappointing because I was bullish on Andy Dalton. I thought that Pittsburgh was going to be a nice little matchup. Instead, Dalton finishes as the quarterback 26. In fact, Dalton has finished as the quarterback 18 or worse each of the last 3 weeks, and he's finished better than quarterback 15 only once, and that was week 7 against Arizona, that Thursday night game. So Andy Dalton, severely disappointing in this game. 17-27, 2 interceptions. He threw for 1 touchdown, only 171 passing yards against one of the worst secondaries in the NFL. And then Kamara was just bottled up. Goodness gracious, Kamara, 8 carries for 26 yards, 3 receptions, 19 yards, 4 targets, 79% of the snaps. And that's just wild to me that Kamara, is getting all of that work and not producing. And this is the second time that Kamara has finished with fewer than 8 fantasy points. And I don't know if there's another injury or if something else is going on, but it's not like any other back is getting involved. Jordan Howard had 1 carry for 1 yard in this game. So I would brush it off as a bad game for Kamara. That's it. But it was a bad game for the wide receivers too, right? Olave went 3 for 40 with 5 on 5 targets. Jarvis Landry in his return, 3 for 37, 6 targets. Jarvis in his first game as well played almost 80% of the snaps. So he's a full-time player when he's back there. Rashid Shaheed got 1 catch for 12 yards in this game. He played 13% of the snaps. And the big winner for this game, Juwan Johnson, 7 targets, led the team in targets, 5 receptions, 44 yards, and the touchdown. Juwan Johnson finishing as the tight end 4. In fact, Juwan Johnson, here's a name for your waiver wire. If you haven't picked him up, he's finished as a top 8 tight end 3 of the last 4 weeks. Okay. Yes. He's had 4 touchdowns during this span, but I mean, leading the team in targets, you'll have to take that. And Juwan Johnson also playing a good amount of snaps, 66% of the snaps, right? Over the last 5 weeks, Juwan Johnson has played 66% or more of the snaps. And even weeks 1, 2, and 3, 74, 78, 68% of snaps. Only twice has he fallen below that 66% threshold for snaps. So Juwan Johnson is a touchdown viable tight end. Like I view him as a tight end 2 with tight end 1 touchdown upside. That's how you should roll with Juwan Johnson moving forward. He's got a low floor, but a pretty high ceiling, as we've seen. All right, let's look in the comments. Let's see what's going on here. Michael Valley, Tony Pollard should be the running back for the Cowboys. Man broke out again. I know we got to have a Jerry intervention about Tony Pollard. We're going to talk about the Dallas Cowboys here in a second, but I mean, Tony Pollard, he's not only playing almost all the snaps, he's getting almost all the touches too. Yep. There we go. So yes, Michael Valley, you're hitting on it. We as fantasy managers want to see the full Tony Pollard, but if Zeke is healthy, and the Cowboys have been playing it pretty cagey as of late, so we're probably just going to have to play the wait and see game with Tony Pollard moving forward. All right, we've got a couple games left. The Monday night game is getting wrapped up, but we're going to move to the Tennessee game, and the Tennessee Titans edge out the Denver Broncos. The Titans moved to 6-3, the Broncos 3-6. Tannehill coming back from the injury, 19 fantasy points, finishing as the quarterback, 8 on the week, 2 passing touchdowns. He had 2 rushes for 12 yards, 255 passing yards. Malik Willis lost a fumble in this game. Derrick Henry was disappointing, 19 of 53, 14 receiving yards as well. He had 3 targets in the game. Dontrell Hilliard was sprinkled in here and there. Nick Westbrook-Akine led the wide receiver core in targets. He went 5 of 8 for 119 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns in this game, 26 fantasy points. Nick Westbrook-Akine, wide receiver 5 on the week. Westbrook-Akine hadn't finished better than wide receiver 41 coming into this game this season. And even looking at what he had done last year, right? He had 1 big blow up game in week 11 against Houston, and that was 7 for 107. So you're going to see an occasional big game from Nick Westbrook-Akine. Like he had 3 games last year where he had double-digit fantasy points, but yeah, this is a massive, massive game for Westbrook-Akine. What you have to be encouraged by is the first game back for Treylon Burks. He played 56% of the snaps. He did get 6 targets. It was a disappointing amount of receptions and receiving yards for Treylon Burks, but this was a tough Denver secondary. that lined up against the Tennessee wide receivers. So you have to limit your expectations. And Robert Woods didn't do anything with his 7 targets, 2 for 10. Austin Hooper, 5 for 41 on 7 targets. Okonkwo, 2 targets, 1 reception for 41 yards. Like, I know that there is a lot of like positive Tennessee chatter, but they just faced a really bad Broncos team. It's more credit to the Titans for, I don't know if much credit can go to the Titans, honestly. I was trying to give them credit in that previous statement, but I just can't do it. I just can't do it. Man, Russell Wilson, what are we going to do, guys? What are we going to do? 21 of 42, 286 passing yards. He had a passing touchdown, but he also had a pick. His 7 carries resulted in only 8 yards. And even on the ground, Melvin Gordon was bottled up. Latavius Murray was bottled up. Chase Edmonds was bottled up. And I mentioned that last week as well, that I didn't anticipate any spike games for the running backs. Gordon finishing as the running back 26 on the week, 4 receptions for 46 yards. Latavius Murray finishing as running back 32 on the week, 3 receptions, 23 yards, 9 for 24 on the ground. Chase Edmonds doing almost nothing. He played 19% of snaps, got 2 carries, and had 2 targets in this game. Such a wide range of outcomes for Chase Edmonds. Unfortunately, I think he's falling on the wrong side here. And Jerry Jeudy left this game early. He only had 1 target in this game. He had a heel/ankle injury. That's where Kendall Hinton, who had been dealing with an injury coming into practice this week, 4 for 62, finishing as the wide receiver 40 on the week, 96% of snaps. Good for Kendall Hinton. And if Jeudy is out for a long period of time, you have to think that Kendall Hinton is going to step into that slot role for Jeudy. Courtland Sutton got 11 targets. You're going to be happy with that. 6 for 66. You wish that he got the touchdown, but you're not going to complain about 9.6 fantasy points. I mean, maybe you will complain a little bit. He was wide receiver 34, but get him that extra touchdown, and you're looking at a top 20 wide receiver for Courtland Sutton. And on the season, Sutton is the wide receiver 34, but that includes his bye week. Okay. And then looking at the tight end position, like Dulcich, he busted for you, but still played almost 90% of the snaps. He had 4 targets on off of 42 attempts, so less than a 10% target share. It was a bad game for Dulcich. So let's answer some more questions here. Elver Gasso traded Aaron Jones and Taysom Hill for Mark Andrews. Standard league. Other running backs are Etn, JT, Pierce, Kamara. Beautiful. That's exactly what you want to do. I love it. I love it, love it, love it. Etn and JT are going to be solid running back 1s and 2s the rest of the way. Pierce is going to be a solid running back 2. Kamara's got upside. So yes, that was a good pickup for you, upgrading to Mark Andrews from Taysom Hill. Let's keep it rolling here. We're going to move from the Tennessee Titans Denver Broncos game to the Vegas Raiders and Indianapolis Colts game. And this is why you need to subscribe to my channel. Subscribe. Make sure you're hitting that red subscribe button. Please do it. Hit that red subscribe button. Turn on the notifications, and you would have gotten notice that I would have told you that Indy was facing off against Vegas and Matt Ryan was going to get the start, right? I was one of the first people to tweet out, after we saw the news that Matt Ryan was getting snaps, and I made videos about it. I said you should be starting Matt Ryan as a solid quarterback too, with high-end quarterback 2 upside given the matchup against Vegas. They give up a lot of fantasy points to the quarterback position, and lo and behold, Matt Ryan gets a lot of fantasy points against the Vegas Raiders, finishing as the quarterback 4, his second best finish of the week, 21 of 28 with a passing touchdown, a rushing touchdown, and 38 rushing yards. 38 rushing yards for Matt Ryan is a career high. So what does this mean moving forward? Well, Matt Ryan gets the Philadelphia Eagles next week, and that's going to be a real tough matchup. Then he gets Pittsburgh, which is a better matchup, and then Dallas, which we just saw Aaron Rodgers throw for 4 passing touchdowns. But you have to lower your expectations a little bit for Matt Ryan. So maybe as a mid quarterback 2, probably as a quarterback 15 to 18 is how I would value Matt Ryan moving forward. Here's the thing. I mentioned this even earlier, before we heard the news about Matt Ryan. I said Jeff Saturday wants to win, and he's got nothing to lose. He wants to win. He's got nothing to lose. Matt Ryan gives the Colts the best chance to win. It's a no-brainer. Jeff Saturday knows what it's like to work with Hall of Fame people, and Matt Ryan, you may debate whether or not Matt Ryan is a Hall of Fame player, but Jeff Saturday realizes how good Matt Ryan has been, what kind of preparations he's put in. And Matt Ryan, is a consummate professional. And I had related, this is like the third or fourth time in the last week that I've said this was the Eli Manning situation played out with just an extra week in between. Matt Ryan is going to be the starter for the rest of the year. They got their 2 good looks at Sam Ehlinger and said, you know what, we're good. They fired the offensive coordinator. They fired the coach. We're back to Matt Ryan. And Matt Ryan puts up, the second best fantasy day of the season. A running back I was higher on than consensus and pretty significantly was Jonathan Taylor. Taylor finishing as the running back 1 on the week, 22 carries, 147 rushing yards, 1 rushing score, 2 receptions for 16 yards, and 94% of the snaps. You love seeing that 94. He's playing almost all the snaps. And that's what I wrote up in my Fantasy Data article this past week, was that with Nyheim Hines gone, and we've already seen Jonathan Taylor running at least 19 routes a game, we're going to see full-on Jonathan Taylor, which is why you should be firing him up as a top 10 running back. And consensus was like running back 14, running back 15. There was a little bit of hedging. I said, no, he's definitely top 10. And, it played out that way, that the Colts, leaned heavily on Jonathan Taylor. As I said before, and I'll say it again, Matt Ryan and Jeff Saturday want to win football games. They're going to get the ball to their players, right? And Jonathan Taylor had 24 touches in this game. Paris Campbell had 9 targets, 7 for 76 and a touchdown. Paris Campbell, full-time player. Michael Pittman, 7 for 53 on 9 targets as well. You saw 18 total targets between Campbell and Pittman. Okay, Alec Pierce relegated to a goose egg, 2 targets. Kylan Granson clearly playing over Mo Alley Cox. Granson, 46% of the snaps, but 4 receptions, 57 receiving yards. Mo Alley Cox, no targets, no receptions. He was mostly out there blocking tight end, 62% of the snaps, but it's Kylan Granson who was the interesting tight end play this past week. Okay, that brings the conclusion to Indianapolis versus Indianapolis side. We'll flip to the Las Vegas side. 17.92 fantasy points for Derek Carr, finishing as the quarterback 14 on the week, 24 of 38, 2 passing touchdowns. But Derek Carr, the floor is so dang low for Derek Carr. His ADOT is ridiculously short. 8 targets to Josh Jacobs, 6 receptions for 28 yards. What? Amir Abdullah, 4 for 4 targets, 33 receiving yards. Right? Devontae Adams, 14 receptions, 126 yards. Mac Hollins, 6 targets, 18 yards. Right? 4 targets for 43 yards for Foster Moreau. Right? So many passes close to the line of scrimmage. You hate to see it for Derek Carr because the upside is there with Devontae Adams. Adams went 9 for 126 and a touchdown, 23 fantasy points. Right? He's the wide receiver 5 in the season, finishing wide receiver 6 for this week. But Mac Hollins, 6 targets, can't get the ball to him. Lots and lots of dump offs against this Indianapolis Colts defense, which I mentioned was a tough run defense. So instead of playing the run, they play the dump off. Of course, right? Josh Jacobs, 21 of 78, really inefficient on the ground. Still got the touchdown, still got all the passing work. Right, Jacobs was out there for 79% of the snaps. We're finishing as running back 8 on the week. He's running back 6 in total points, and the The Raiders get the Denver Broncos next, and that's a tough matchup. I mean, the last time that Josh Jacobs faced off against the Denver Broncos, though, he put all of that toughness to rest. He finished as the running back, 128 rushes for 144 yards, 2 touchdowns, 6 targets, 5 receptions, 31 yards. So Josh Jacobs with Denver, and then moving forward, we also see Seattle, the Chargers. So he's got 3 straight games where he's either had proven production or has a smash matchup. So you're not fading Josh Jacobs at all moving forward. He is a bona fide running back 1. There's no reason to fade him. And then, as I mentioned, Foster Moreau stepped in, got the touchdown. He's going to finish as the tight end of 5 on the week due to that touchdown. So Foster Moreau ended up out scoring Harrison Bryant, but both were plug and play tight end 2s with now touchdown tight end 1 upside. Whew. All right. For those who are still watching, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. Appreciate y'all jumping in. I can answer a couple questions as we finish up the last few games of week 10 review. Dallas traveled to Green Bay, and Mike McCarthy yet found more ways for the Green Bay Packers to win. The Dallas Cowboys tried out Dak Prescott. Prescott had a decent game from a fantasy perspective. He finishes the quarterback 6, which is good. 3 passing touchdowns, but he did have 2 picks, which kind of hurt. 265 passing yards, 4 rushes for 6 yards. Quarterback 6 once again. You got to be happy with that. And then 20.3 fantasy points for Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard finishing as the running back 7, 115 rushing yards, 3 receptions, 13 receiving yards. He had, the touchdown. But what is key here is that Tony Pollard set a career high with 87% of snaps played. If Zeke is not going to be out against Minnesota, right, you're going to be firing up Tony Pollard as, once again, a solid running back 1. Pollard has not finished. He's finished as the running back finishes running back 2. This is half PPR. Finishes running back 2, 4, and 7 each of the 3 games that he's been the starter. So he's gonna be a running back 1 for you. He was a consensus like running back 14, and I had moved to a running back 14. I had moved him to running back 9 once we got news about Ezekiel Elliott, or at least Sunday morning when we got the feeling that Zeke wasn't going to be out there. And you're going to be firing up Tony Pollard no matter what. Okay. And then looking at the wide receivers, man, my biggest miss here was CeeDee Lamb. I thought CeeDee was going to get bottled up in this game. What an idiot. I'm stupid. Okay. Here's the thing. Every time that I say this is going to be a CeeDee Lamb game, it's not. And every time that I say this is not going to be a CeeDee Lamb game, it is. And CeeDee Lamb goes for 32 fantasy points, 11 of 15 for 150 yards. He's the wide receiver 1, right? 150 total receiving yards. This is the 4th time that CeeDee Lamb has finished as a top 12 wide receiver this year. But, 2 of those 4 games have been with Dak Prescott. And you love to see the target share. You love to see, the touchdowns now. And then he gets Minnesota, who gives up a lot of fantasy points to the wide receiver position. He does have a tough matchup with the Giants, Indianapolis, and then he gets Houston, but then Jacksonville in week 15, which is juicy. Philadelphia is tough, and then Tennessee is really nice. So he sets up really nice in week 17 against the Tennessee Titans. So, you're going to see some ups and you're going to see some downs for CeeDee Lamb, but being able to predict those, learn your lesson from me. CeeDee Lamb is going to be a hard one to predict. Michael Gallup left this game early with a knee injury, 4 for 7, 35 yards. It was not the same knee that suffered the ACL from last year. So that was good news. Gallup was able to return to this game. But looking at the rest of the wide receivers, like Turpin had a target, Noah Brown had 3 targets, Jalen Tolbert didn't have a target. None of the other wide receivers really made a difference. Dalton Schultz, though, was second on the team in targets with 8. He finished 6 of 54 for 1 touchdown. Dalton Schultz, 14 fantasy points. He's finishing as the tight end 3 for this week. So that's pretty nice. He's going to continue to play almost all of the snaps, 76% of the snaps in this one, and get Sean McKeon got a couple targets as well, but it's still the Dalton Schultz game. Let's not get carried away here. And as for the Packers, finally Aaron Rodgers does something. Finally, Aaron Rodgers finishes as the quarterback 10. He had not finished as a top 10 quarterback at all this season. He had a couple top 12 finishes. He had a quarterback 13 finishes, 2 quarterback 14 finishes. He had flirted with the high-end quarterback 2s, but the quarterback 1, finally, he has to throw for 3 passing touchdowns, but still doesn't get there with the passing yards, only 224. And in fact, Rodgers has finished below that mark 4 times, right? Outside of this game. So 50% of the time, Aaron Rodgers throws for 225 passing yards or fewer. The passing yards is not there. He's relying tremendously on efficiency. And Aaron Jones does well in this game, 24 carries, 138 yards, a touchdown, 2 receptions, 18. And Dallas is usually a pretty tough defense. So this was not the game script I anticipated, Dallas versus Green Bay. Obviously, as the Green Bay Packers fan, the Bakhtiari jersey behind me, I'm a big Packers fan, and I'm happy about this win. But it was not how I expected it to go. Aaron Jones sets a season high with carries of 24, and he finishes as the running back 2 on the week. A.J. Dillon, 13 carries for 65 yards. I mean, that's the most carries that A.J. Dillon has had since week 4. But he still finishes the running back 31 despite only 38% of snaps. Not a good sign for A.J. Dillon. Kylan Hill was not involved in this game. Christian Watson, 8 targets, obviously out of 20 pass attempts for Aaron Rodgers. That ends up being a 40% share. Christian Watson is giving me Gabe Davis vibes. He's going to get a lot of targets. He's going to miss a lot of passes, but he's going to have boom or bust games. And this is going to be the type of boom game, right? 30.7 fantasy points. Christian Watson finishing as the wide receiver 2 on the week. Sammy Watkins, 3 of 47 on 3 targets. Wide receiver 50. Lazard was disappointing, 3 for 45 on 4 targets. Amari Rodgers was trash. Robert Tonyan only had a catch on 1 target for 8 yards. Ultimately, the Packers, they got lucky with Christian Watson playing really well and getting open. He is a big play waiting to happen, but the 50% catch rate is concerning. And looking on the season, right, 14 receptions on 22 targets, right? And he's missed a lot of these deep passes that could have been massive plays. So Christian Watson is a high-end flex play moving forward, but I don't know if you can move him into that top 24 at all with any confidence. I can't do it, even with that really nice target share. I am skeptical about the pass volume for Green Bay moving forward. All right, we're going to answer a couple more questions and then round out with the last few games of the slate. We've got 3 games left after I answer W234's questions. Do I pick up Dalton Schultz or Cole Kmet for Everett? Yeah, I would pick up, you got to chase the offenses that are doing really well. And I think Cole Kmet is the one that you're going to chase here. The touchdowns have been there, and he's been consistently doing it. He hasn't been dealing with an injury either. Dalton Schultz is still working his way back, even though you're happy with what you've seen this past week. Cole Kmet, just ride the wave. Just ride the wave. And how is Paris Campbell's outlook after the return of Matt Ryan? I mean, well, yeah, getting back to the Indianapolis matchup, Campbell, right, with he in the last 3 games that Matt Ryan has played, 11, 12, and 9 targets, 7, 10, and 7 receptions, right? He's finished as the wide receiver 12, 7, and wide receiver 9 in the last 3 games that Matt Ryan has played. So, yes, I think you're going to start seeing Paris Campbell get bumped up into that top 24 conversation. He gets Philly, which is a tough defense. He gets Pittsburgh, which is nice. Dallas, which is, we've seen a couple busted plays against Dallas. Minnesota, which is nice. Of course, the bye is still tucked in there. The Chargers and the Giants are a tough defense week 17, but you have to like what you see out of Paris Campbell. It's going to be a pretty nice volume play moving forward for Campbell. All right. Arizona traveled to the Rams and started Colt McCoy and somehow came away with a victory, right? I mean, Trace McSorley got a couple snaps in here. Yeah, they're not even registering, but Trace McSorley gets a couple snaps in here. Colt McCoy was injured during this game, but still gutted out the victory. He was the preferred option. If you had Stafford or Kyler Murray and you need to make a late swap, right? Colt McCoy was the play here because Bryce Perkins got 4 touches in this game, right? Bryce Perkins, the backup the third string quarterback for the Rams, had 1 pass for -3 yards and 3 carries for 4 yards. And that was the kind of the concern, was that Perkins would pull a couple opportunities out of the offense for Wolford. And then, of course, the Kupp injury affected the Rams as well. So Colt McCoy finishing with nearly 14 fantasy points on the week, quarterback 23, Wolford with not even 10 fantasy points. James Conner, Mr. Inefficient himself, still the running back 5 on the week, 21 of 69. Nice. 2 rushing scores, 3 targets, 3 receptions. He played 96% of the snaps. And James Conner is going to have that kind of workload moving forward. Eno Benjamin was cut. Okay. And let's look at what James Conner did last year when there was no Chase Edmonds, right? In week 10 against Carolina, 82% of snaps, 10 for 39 and a touchdown, 3 for 25 through the air. Week 11, 82% of snaps, 20 of 62, 1 touchdown, 5 receptions for 37 yards. Week 13, 91% of snaps, 75 rushing yards, 20 rush attempts, 2 receptions for 36 yards. And against the LA Rams, 96% of snaps. This was back in 2021, 13 for 31, 2 rushing scores, 9 receptions for 94 yards in week 14 of 2021. So when we see James Conner, he is a solid running back 2 with high-end running back 1 upside due to the touchdowns. If he just gets a couple rushes off, that's how you should view him moving forward. And Conner's going to get 80 to 90% of the snaps. Keontae Ingram, only 1 carry for 5 yards in this game, played 7% of the snaps. And then Hopkins, 10 for 98, finished with 14.8 fantasy points, 14 targets. He finishes the wide receiver 15 on the week, no touchdowns. That's what's going to keep you down. Rondell Moore, 13 targets in this game, 9 for 94. He had a beautiful one-handed catch, finishing as the wide receiver 19. And Rondell Moore has finished as the wide receiver 21 or better each of the last 3 weeks, 8, 10, and 13 targets, 7, 8, and 9 receptions. You see in week 10 is trending up towards San Francisco. Let's see if he gets 10 receptions in that game. But you have to be happy with what Rondell Moore has put up as a flex-worthy play for you. AJ Green had a touchdown reception in this game. Zach Ertz leaves the game early, 1 reception for 12 yards. He is out for the year. Instead, it's Trey McBride coming in, playing 91% of the snaps, only 1 target, 1 reception for 7 yards, tight end 43. And look, I put this in one of the videos earlier today. I think Trey McBride is going to be a solid wide tight end 2 for you moving forward with low end tight end 1 upside, but he's nothing more than like a Foster Moreau at this point. Maybe he can get to that top 10 if he falls into the end zone and increases the targets. He was a Mackey Award winner, tight end of the year award winner in college, 2nd round pick in the rookie draft this past year for the Cardinals. He was a longer-term investment, but looks like they're going to have to dip into that savings earlier than anticipated. Arizona is having lost Zach Ertz here. So Trey McBride is a tight end waiver consideration in your deeper leagues. As for Darrell Henderson, right, 6 carries, 21 yards. He got the touchdown. He had 1 target, 1 reception for 11 yards, finishing as the running back 23 on 57% of the snaps. Cam Akers, 6 rushes for 22 yards, only 1 target, 17% of the snaps. So it was clearly in favor of Henderson. But then near the end of the game, Kyren Williams, 27% of the snaps, finishing as the running back 37. He only had 1 carry for 9 yards, but he had 3 receptions for 30 yards. And his player profiler comp is Theo Riddick. And we saw in the Detroit Lions, right, for years, Theo Riddick put up low-end running back 2 numbers in PPR, and even in half PPR, like high-end running back 3 numbers where, he could be a flex consideration. And I think Kyren Williams can eventually get into that spot. His profile fit as a pass catcher at Notre Dame, just like Theo Riddick was. But also Kyren Williams was shown that he could handle the load. He handled nearly 200 carries every year that he was the starter. He had over almost 1,000 rushing yards each of those 2 seasons. He had 48 targets and a nearly 11% target share. So Kyren Williams, working his way back, was second in running back snaps. Ronnie Rivers is his fantasy value has gone down the river. So there you go. Okay. Van Jefferson caught 3 passes, 27 yards and a touchdown. Allen Robinson had 6 targets in this game. In fact, for Allen Robinson, the 6 targets is tied for the second highest on the season. If he falls in the end zone, right, he ends up being a wide receiver 2. But if he does not fall in the end zone, then he falls, usually as a wide receiver 4. So Allen Robinson really misses Matthew Stafford, but maybe not. Yikes. Ben Skoranek had 7 targets in this game. Cooper Kupp had to leave with a pretty significant knee injury. He did play 67% of the snaps, so he was, 2/3 of the game of the way through before he suffered that injury. Still, going into that, only 3 receptions, 5 targets, -1 receiving yard. That's got to really hurt Cooper Kupp. I was low on Cooper Kupp, but I did not have him wide receiver 89 low. Sorry, everyone. And then Tyler Higbee finally had a good game with John Walford there. 8 receptions, 8 targets, 73 receiving yards, finishing as the tight end 6 on the week. Fading Higbee, of course, was the wrong thing. How would we know that? All right, 2 games left. Make sure you're hitting that red subscribe button. Appreciate y'all jumping in and watching and listening. The Chargers traveled to San Francisco for Sunday Night Football, and the 49ers edged out the Chargers, who were without, Keenan Allen and Big Mike Williams. Herbert, 21-35, 196 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown. He had a pick, 5 carries for 22 yards, only 13 fantasy points, finishing as the quarterback 24 on the week. That's a lot of disappointing. In fact, this is the 3rd time this year where Justin Herbert has finished outside of the top 20 of quarterbacks. And when you're missing Keenan Allen and when you're missing Mike Williams, your ceiling and floor just get lowered and lowered and lowered. And that's what we're seeing is just inconsistencies from Justin Herbert. We saw the first couple weeks, quarterback 5 and quarterback 9, but the last 2 weeks for Herbert, even coming out of the bye against smash matchup against Atlanta, quarterback 18, and now against a tougher defense in San Francisco, quarterback 24. Austin Eckler was mostly bottled up, 9.8 fantasy points in this game. He played 69% of the snaps, 6 for 24 on the ground, 7 receptions, 39 yards, 12 targets. He was mostly bottled up by the San Francisco offense. And I was warning y'all, I had moved Austin Eckler down a little bit in my rankings. He was not a top 5 running back for me. And he finishes this week as the running back 22, which is his 3rd worst performance of the season. Okay, Isaiah Spiller got 4 carries. Sony Michel got a carry. So I think it's pretty safe to say that Isaiah Spiller is working his way back in. And that could be an interesting matchup here as we get into week 17 chatter, because if Austin Eckler suddenly goes down with an injury, Isaiah Spiller, I think, is the running back you want in the LA Chargers backfield as a deep consideration, as a deep league consideration, or as a running back flyer. If you're accumulating running backs for the playoffs, Remember, the Chargers get the Rams in week 17. That could be a real smash play. All right, DeAndre Carter crushed, right? He finishes this week as the wide receiver 16. DeAndre Carter has had 3 games so far this year where he's finished as wide receiver 28 or better. 4 for 64 and the touchdown will get him there. Josh Palmer disappointed. I wanted to be lower on Palmer this week. 3 for 44, only 5.9 fantasy points and half PPR. Trey McKitty, interestingly enough, 6 targets, and I think he's the tight end you want if Gerald Everett is not going to play in week 11. Remember, Everett left this game early with a groin strain. So Gerald Everett, 2 of 23 before he left. Trey McKitty, 3 for 21. He's the plug-and-play tight end 2 with touchdown upside for Trey McKitty, second-year player, second-year tight end. And for the San Francisco 49ers, let's talk about Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Does not throw a passing touchdown, finishes with 15.9 fantasy points, quarterback 19 on the week. Christian McCaffrey, 14 carries for 38 yards and a touchdown. 4 catches for 6 targets, 39 yards. Through the air, 15.7 fantasy points. McCaffrey's the running back 11 for this week, 65% of the snaps. That is decreased from last week. Elijah Mitchell, 18 for 89 instead. Elijah Mitchell out-carries Christian McCaffrey. McCaffrey's still that third down, long down and distance type of player, but Elijah Mitchell got 35% of the snaps and out-carried McCaffrey. 18 carries, 89 yards to McCaffrey's 14 for 38. It's going to be a split backfield the rest of the way. That's how I envision it from a carries perspective. Maybe it's an Elijah Mitchell. Maybe it's a Christian McCaffrey game. McCaffrey's going to get all the passing work, which is why McCaffrey's still like a running back 1 for me moving forward. But Elijah Mitchell, if he falls in the end zone, we're talking a higher end running back 2, given all of the volume of carries. And you know that Kyle Shanahan likes to use a lot of backs to keep guys fresh. And that's been one of the things, too, that San Francisco 49ers have been really struggling with after trading away Jeff Wilson, right? And letting Raheem Mostert sign in free agency. So now we have Brandon Ayuk, 6 for 84 on 7 targets, right? That's 7 of 28. Ayuk with a 25% target share in this game, playing 97% of the snaps, finishing as the wide receiver 36 because he fell just short of the end zone. Deebo Samuel has to be disappointing. And in the 2 games that Christian McCaffrey, has played, Deebo didn't play. But then Deebo comes back in this first game, and then wide receiver 53. 2 receptions for 24 yards, 4 carries for 27 yards. How can we be comfortable playing Deebo Samuel as more than a desperation flex play moving forward? Okay. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I have that audacity. Like, you got to fire up Deebo Samuel, right? Right? Maybe. Now we've got major questions. This is where you have to be concerned. And if you need more of spot starts, like trading away Deebo Samuel to someone who still believes in him, right? You got to lower expectations for Deebo Samuel. Juwan Jennings had 4 targets and 4 receptions for 40 yards in this game. George Kittle was massively disappointing, only 1 reception for 21 yards. He's the tight end 18 on the year, finishing as tight end 29 this week. Him and Greg Dulcich need to get together and talk about how they've been disappointing. Same thing with Kyle Pitts. Those 3 need to get together and figure out what they did wrong in week 10. Okay, let's move on to the last game of the week. We do have a final, Washington versus Philadelphia. The Washington Commanders knock off the home Eagles, and the Eagles are no longer 8-0. They are 8-1. Washington edges them out, and Heineke doesn't do much in this game, right? He has a pick, only throws for 211 yards, 17 of 29, 6.4 fantasy points. Heineke finishes, well, we don't have the final number yet, but 6.4 is probably falling outside of the top 20 of quarterbacks. Brian Robinson, 26 of 86 on the ground, 14 fantasy points. Brian Robinson he's probably going to finish as a top 15 running back on the week. Antonio Gibson, 13.3 fantasy points, 14 for 44. He had 3 receptions and 14 receiving yards, and he had the rushing score. So you have to be happy with that. Terry McLaurin, 16.8 fantasy points, 8 for 128. No touchdown, but 16.8 probably gets him, as a wide receiver too. Curtis Samuel had 2 catches for 28 yards and 4 carries for 12 yards. Right. And Joey Sly, 4 field goals made in this game. Honestly, it was the Washington defense also that came up clutch. They had a defensive touchdown in this game. They had a pick, they had a sack, 2 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries in this game. They held Philadelphia to only 21 total points. And Jalen Hurts, 23 fantasy points in this game, 6 for 28 with a rushing score. He threw 2 passing touchdowns, but keeping Jalen Hurts off the field and only passing for 189 yards was big time. Miles Sanders, 12 for 54, no touchdowns, 5.4 fantasy points, right? That's going to fall outside the top 36 of running backs. Kenny Gainwell wasn't involved much. Devonta Smith got a touchdown on his birthday, 6 for 53 and a touchdown, 14.3 fantasy points. AJ Brown busted massively, 1 catch, 4 targets, 7 yards. Yikes. After AJ Brown finishes the wide receiver 1 2 weeks ago against Pittsburgh, that was a massive disappointment. So AJ Brown probably lost you weeks this week. Dallas Goedert had a touchdown, 23 yards, 3 receptions, but he did lose a fumble, 7.8 fantasy points. Still probably gets him into that high-end tight end 2 for the week. Not really many takeaways from that game. A gutsy win by the Washington Commanders. And now that we've finished all of that, I want to make sure you're hitting that subscribe button, and I'll finish with answering some questions. I've been on here for almost 2 hours now, so thanks for staying with me. Lincoln was here. What running back should I be selling Joe Mixon? I want another running back for him because I only have Kamara, Zeke, Chuba. I'm now in Dynasty. The guy also wants DK and either Kamara or Joe Mixon for Chase. What other running back do you want from this? Well, let's take a look. Okay, so in that same range as Joe Mixon, right, we're talking Josh Jacobs, Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, but you already have Kamara. So see if you can get Ramondre Stevenson plus for Joe Mixon. That's what I would recommend. Lincoln was here. And then would you trade Kupp for Jamar straight up? I'm 7-3, but I'm going to play Kadarius Toney or Curtis Samuel from now on if I don't make the trade. Yeah, I would trade away Kupp. Chase is probably going to be back sooner, is my guess. Like if I'm a betting man, I would bet that Jamar Chase comes back sooner than Kupp. Or if he doesn't, that Jamar produces better rest of season. They might rush Kupp back out there because there's desperation for the Rams to make the playoffs, and they're not in good shape. If you remember, the Rams lost to the Arizona Cardinals, and the Rams fall to 3-6. So they're in a lot of trouble. So yes, I would try to trade Kupp for Jamar Chase. Would it be really strong at wide receiver if I got Chase? I would have just JJ and Chase, Rondell Moore, Adam Thielen. Yeah, you don't want to trade DK. You don't want to trade DK Lincoln. And would have Keenan Allen coming back for the playoffs. Hopefully. That dang hamstring, at least we're going to get, we expect that Keenan Allen's going to be practicing this week. It's tough. Deebo Samuel's too good not to start, but everything is trending down. I agree. W234. That's what I would say. Lincoln, I would get rid of Kamara if you're going to sell a running back. That is fair, but you want to sell him at market rate. You don't want to sell him low. Kamara's coming off of 2 plays. Who's better overall, Clyde Edwards-Helaire or David Montgomery? Man, MJ's elite. I appreciate you jumping in because you just gave me the most meh question. You just gave me the most meh question. Clyde Edwards-Helaire or David Montgomery? Oh, yikes! Yeah, I would. I'd probably go Clyde Edwards-Helaire probably as the better, more dynamic pass catcher. That's who I would go. Hurts won me my matchup, but dang, it was close. Sat Lamb for Pierce. Yeah, man. Lamb, I mean, you were firing him up as a running or a wide receiver too. Consensus was at wide receiver 10 or so, and I moved him down to 18 because, tough matchup, Green Bay, slow pace, not going to score a lot. And of course, the one game that the Packers go bonkers in, right? That's what we're talking about. Sat Lamb for Pierce. Yeah, that's got to sting a little bit. But Pierce, he wasn't bad, but he wasn't weak winning like CD Lamb was this week. So unfortunately, glad that you got that matchup, Ryan. And then I answered that for you there. MJ's elite. I would say that Clyde Edwards-Helaire, better pass catcher than David Montgomery and more yards after catch, just based on the eye test. So there we go. All right. Wow. I did not think I would be going 2 hours, but here we are starting CPAT over Connor. Oh, I know. Let's get all those tears out for this week. Those tough starts, right? Man, oh man. I mean, there were a couple players I didn't take out of lineups. I just didn't catch it. Didn't catch them quick enough. So yeah, that kind of stinks when you're taking an automatic 0 or CPAT, just disappointing. So we learned our lesson. I think there is going to be a bounce back week for CPAT. There we go. Montgomery better than CEH. CEH running by 4 behind Pacheco, McKinnon, and Jackson Mahomes. Enrique, I agree with you from a fantasy perspective. I think David Montgomery is the better fantasy option compared to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, for sure. But as a real life running back, the pass catching is better in my opinion. Lincoln was here countered with I get Chase and his mid to late second for DK and Kamara. I still think that's selling low. I still think that you need to ask more than a late second. A late first is probably going to get you there. Should I be worried about Joe Mixon's and Justin Fields' playoff schedule? So the championship week for Fields, heck no. You should not be afraid. You should be aggressively going after Fields for the championship week. His floor is probably going to be high enough that you'll be okay surviving, if he has a lower floor game. But Fields gets Detroit again in week 17. So yes, you want Fields. And then going back to the Bengals, right? Joe Mixon gets in during the playoffs. He gets Tampa in week 15. That's tough rush defense at Tampa. Although at that time, we don't know how Tampa's going to be. They're a 500 team now. New England at New England. That's tough. And then Buffalo is really tough. So that is a concern. You're thinking that Joe Mixon is going to get volume, but there have been 3 games so far this year where Joe Mixon has 12 or fewer carries in a game. Yikes. Jeff Wilson got more points on my bench than Kamara and Pierce. I know. We're going to have to fire up Jeff Wilson as a solid running back too, and then with obvious running back 1 upside, right? If he gets a plus matchup rest of the way. Miami's in the bye week, so you're not going to be playing them in week 11. Should we be worried about Alvin Kamara and Dame? I assume Dameon Pierce. And I wouldn't be as worried about Alvin Kamara. There was only 1 other touch by a running back in that backfield. So I'm not worried about Alvin Kamara. And then Dameon Pierce, you're going to have to ride there's just a limited ceiling with Dameon Pierce is what I'm saying. He's probably going to finish between running back 24 and running back 8 every week. And it just depends on that touchdown, right? And the yards are going to vary. So you're going to be happy with the floor for Dameon Pierce, but the ceiling, not so much. And then Alvin Kamara, I think better days are ahead. All right. Awesome. Well, yeah, I've been on here for almost 2 hours. I appreciate y'all jumping in. Make sure you're hitting that red subscribe button, sharing with your friends, commenting on the videos. I appreciate y'all jumping in. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, good luck in the best ball streets, everybody.
Hey, really the only thing that gon' be normal is distribution. Normal folks gon' infuse some. Optimize your lineups and you feed the rest, you mute them. Turning it up, these numbers are loud. Peeping this game from a nimbus is wild. Making it rain while I embrace all this risk, I'm insane. Talking about that best bell, I'm the best till into the next world. Guess I got next still. Best bell, I'm the best rest till into the next world. Guess I got next still.